Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about World Home Economics Day, which is coming up on March 21st. I'm Gina Peak. I'm at Oklahoma State University in the College of Education and Human Sciences, and we're here to talk about sustainability of the housing stock with two housing experts. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Hi, I'm Sue Ballard Ruiz at Tennessee State University. I'm actually in the College of Liberal Arts, and I am in the design area teaching classes in housing and interior design.
Hi, I'm Randy Cantrell at the University of Florida. I'm in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences within the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences, focusing on housing and community development.
Thank you for those introductions. And so, as we were getting ready to visit with everyone today, we were thinking, what about housing stock, housing sustainability? And thinking, okay, well, we need some sort of a theoretical perspective to sort of um, get our thoughts together. And so, one article that we used is The Theory of Family Housing Adjustment, which was written by Earl Morris and Mary Winter, published in 1975. And so, this really serves as a foundation for a lot of the work that we do here in the United States. And so, this article posits that families really change their behaviors to adjust to housing conditions. So there's family norms. So, for example, if families grow or decrease in size, and then there's cultural norms as well. Our American housing norms include space, meaning there needs to be enough space for all of the activities required by families. Tenure here in the United States, tenure, the ownership is the tenure norm. Structure type norms here in the United States, single family is the preferred housing. And finally, quality norms. And this one is going to be important for our discussion today as it ties into what Randy and Sue have to say. So, the important thing that I want everybody to think about is that, unlike other housing norms, and I'm quoting from the article, quality norms are probably contingent upon income, and income and housing quality should be congruent. So, if we're thinking about sustainability, we can also think about income as well. And then finally, neighborhood norms. And again, these are relatives to the United States. The article was written back in 1975, but again, it's still very good and useful as we think about housing sustainability as we go forward. So I've got a couple of questions for everybody. Okay, so with respect to Morris and Winter, and a household being housing cost burdened when it pays, for example, more than 30 to 50% of its monthly income towards housing expensive, which creates a deviation from these six norms. And again, space, tenure, structure, quality, neighborhood, and housing expenditure. This requires a decision to be made whether to tolerate the situation in families, make modifications to the home or family, or relocate. So again, this is sustainability of the housing stock. And as we go through, let me start with you, Randy. Here's a question. Can you elaborate a bit about how you see the sustainability of a housing stock intersecting with aging in place?
Yeah, so what we're finding is that there's a trend for folks to remain in their residence as long as possible, as long as it's safe for them to remain there. And this causes the residents to have to be modified to accommodate their needs as they continue to remain in the residence. So we're talking about the housing stock continually aging with them. And in particular, what we're finding, the studies I'm looking at is um, the government public housing stock. In some cases, and of course the private housing stock, it's not equipped to safely allow people to age in place. So for it to remain sustainable, it's got to be modified, torn down, and rebuilt in a sustainable fashion, or modified in a sustainable fashion. But for them to remain in place, it's got to be altered and modified.
Mhm. So what you're referring to basically out of the norms that I've brought up, but this is a quality norm.
It's certainly a quality, quality safety. It eventually the decision part you brought up, you have to make choices. If you're going to safely remain there, something has to change, and that something comes down to um, quality and safety. To me, are synonymous. Something has to change for you to stay there, or you have to go to an assisted living facility that graduates you along the spectrum according to your needs.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, Randy, talk to me a little bit about income. What happens typically as people get older?
Well, everybody likes to refer to it as a fixed income. I believe we're all on fixed incomes, but you're essentially transferred over to your savings or over to, in the United States, a social security sort of system. But the bottom line is the changes that have to be made to the home come out of um, a very tight bucket of income, and often these buckets of income are not sufficient to make the quality types of changes we need in the home. And perhaps corners will be cut in name of remaining in that location. And then we get into the safety issue. And once you fall, once you enter into the hospitalization system, it's in your mind that the fall is there. So um, it's all contingent on one another, but um, the income gets very, very limited in a general sense of the word.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. Do you want to talk any more about any of the research that you're involved in specifically that addresses the intersection between sustainability of the housing stock and aging in place? Is there anything that you're doing right now? Anything you're about to publish? Not
Yeah,
that we're going to scoop your article.
well, we specifically were tasked by the government. It's a multidisciplinary cross university study to look at the government public housing, um, so that peoples of all abilities and disabilities can live in those government public housing, in which case these uh, dwellings are very aged and cannot be replaced because of limitations on government funding funds, and they need to be modified, and they simply do not fit people with wheelchairs and disabilities. We have people coming back from war zones. We have people aging. It's not age necessarily constrained, it's people with disabilities. And these are old dwellings owned by the government. And we're tasked with finding a way to re- replan the floor plans. And instead of doing it physically, we're doing it in a virtual environment with disabled people and having them actually wear virtual goggles before we ever tear one board or one toilet out, and having them tell us, no, that's not going to work, or yes, that really feels good. And they believe they're in that environment because we know how good technology is with virtual environments. And our objective now is to take that data and bring it to the builders or remodelers, and they typically have been a very risk averse population to trying new parts of their business, and they're not really fond of going into these old dwellings and trying a new facet of their business because they don't want to take a risk on, well, what if we lose money? But it's just a new part of their business to go in and try and take 1,000 square foot unit and make it bigger. Just repurpose and make the area bigger so that it accommodates people with disabilities. So right now the program is to go from research to demonstration and application. So that's where we're challenged right now. But it's very exciting. It's very cutting edge. We can't tear down public housing and build new public housing on a large scale like what we have. But it's showing a lot of promise. It's just a matter of not selling the builders, but showing the builders that you can make money at this, and we do need this. It's a sustainability issue. It's
Absolutely.
complicated.
So, Randy, this is really interesting and fascinating. And I know that your appointment is extension, which is translational research, right? So, taking this research and delivering it to the public. So, tell me, what is one consumer tip that you have? What's something that is either low cost or no cost that people can actually do to integrate that sustainability and aging in place?
Well, I have a heavy extension appointment, but I have a heavy research appointment. So um, aging in place is something I call cradle to grave. So if you baby proof a home, you're aging in place. But if you wait until you're aged to start making these changes, you've waited too long. So think of aging in place as changes that you make from the time that you obtain your first home. You don't want an industrial looking home. You want a nice looking home that is safe and comfortable. That's aging in place. Don't come in and tear out the walls and put in ugly industrial looking grab bars when you need them. Be comfortable. Get out of your bathtub in a comfortable, nice looking fashion when you're 40 years old. Think about it early. It doesn't have to be when you break your hip when you're 70. Do it when you're 40 and you want to be comfortable and can afford it on a graduated spectrum for 30 years. If you have to sell the house, sell it as an upgrade.
Got it. So I'm confessing I'm going to be 49 in just a few weeks. So I should be thinking about this now, is what you're saying?
It's complicated because the realtors don't put it on their spreadsheet for this is an upgrade. We're working with them. But if you're a good seller of your home and God forbid you have to sell your home and you don't get to age in it, you just tell them, listen, this isn't an aging in place upgrade. This is a comfort upgrade. Do you want to get out of your bathtub comfortably or do you want to crawl like a snake out of your bathtub? It's all how you sell it to the next seller, but hopefully you'll get to stay in your home. It's your
Yeah,
temple. It's your temple.
I really like how you use the word comfort. Now that speaks to me very much. So, Randy, tell me a little bit. What are about some of the potential barriers or challenges that you see in moving this kind of research forward? So, you talked about how you're using the virtual reality, the headsets, and all of these things. What kinds of things are what barriers do you see in moving this towards the practical applications?
Well, but my background is from industry. I was with the National Association of Home Builders Research Center. I understand clearly. I was in charge of manager of research innovation to help builders get new products into the home. They want to know, like any other entrepreneur, business owner, where's my profit margin? So on the first 10 to 20 units of a 100-unit project, I have to let them know you're going to have a learning curve with no profit. Then on the next 20 to 30 units, you're going to break even. Then on the next 50 units, you're not going to make 15% profit. You're going to make 22% profit because nobody else is here competing because they're afraid of this space. But you came early and you're a early or an innovator or however you want to look at it, but you're here early and you're going to collect and reap the rewards of being a risk taker. It's a hard sell, but it's not. We're not talking about anything revolutionary. We're talking about taking a closet out and expanding a bathroom so you can turn a wheelchair around. I've got some work cut out for me, but it's not rocket science.
Got it. So one thing I just want to circle back to that word comfort. So that really that's going to stay with me, that concept of, instead of thinking this is sort of aging in place, an aging in place issue, thinking of it as a comfort issue. And so that brings me back to Morris and Winter, who talk about housing satisfaction and how that is a key determinant for families. Again, if families are not satisfied, they're either going to adjust the family or just the housing. And so when I think about comfort, that is a satisfaction. That's a satisfying word, a satisfying concept. So again, just sort of tying back to that. So thank you for those thoughts, Randy.
Well, you're welcome, Gina. And keep in mind, if you have a 25-year spectrum to make these adjustments, you can afford to do it your way. if you're found to be injured and have to make these changes and bring your mother in, and you have a 2-week spectrum time frame, I don't need to go on.
It's a lot harder to do. So, Sue, I've got a few questions for you as well. Okay, so what role does our aging housing stock play in the challenges and opportunities for more sustainable housing?
We have to start by looking at how much of our housing, the age of our housing, and what it actually means to be sustainable. We have roughly over 40% of our housing that was built before 1980. About 38% was built before 1969. And we look at those standards, we look at insulation, we look at handicap accessibility. And just like Randy said, we know that we have to make adjustments because also with that housing stock, if you look at who lives in those houses, most of the people for houses that are like 55 years old, most of the people are going to be over 55. They're also a lot of times in older neighborhoods. So they need adjustments. But when we look at that, it also says that we're going to have a way to allow the growing market for renovation in older homes and for an older population. And then we also have houses that are becoming available to younger families. And so when we look at those, what we want to see is what is it that needs to be done? I don't know. There are many cities that have growing populations. I live in Nashville. Housing, affordable housing, and housing in general has been an issue for a couple of decades now. And what we have to do is think about, are we renovating the houses that are there, the existing housing, or are we building new? And when a lot of people think about sustainability in housing, and they think about insulation and basically how energy efficient those houses are, a lot of times they think it's better to go with a new house because it's going to be much more energy efficient. But they have to take in consideration we have embodied energy, that energy that comes from, we've already cut the trees that we're growing, we have that there. So all the materials that are in the existing house, we have that embodied energy. And we also have populations that are very different in the way they use energy in their homes. I worked on a HUD grant several years ago, and one of the things that always stands out to me and that I did in workshops with the homeowners was talk about the Jevons principle. And that principle says that if we become more energy efficient, we often use more energy, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but the way it works, these homes, the older homes, a lot of them didn't have central air or central heating. So the homeowners would often have a window unit air conditioner. And when you have a window unit air conditioner, it's noisy. You often close off rooms. You're